Good morning. This is Jason Dean. Hello, YouTubers, film fanatics on Facebook and such, and all those other good things. Hope everyone's doing good. It's a Thursday morning. This is an early morning show. I've been on this habit. I try not to stay, or I don't know. I try not to. I'm naturally a night person. I typically stay up on the later side of things. But lately I've been going to bed a little early, a little too early, so which causes me to get up very early. But and I typically am a person that like when they do their work, whether it's doing stuff like this. Typically what I end up doing in the morning on a busy day, like my problem a lot of the times is I find I'm lazy a lot of the time. So I always have to keep up on myself to like do things, especially things that I love doing. Usually centered around obvious music things. This running this page and doing these videos and trying to learn about the whole process. And typically, what I do in the morning is I usually get up in the morning, and I usually, like it's no different than anyone else. Typically, get my cup of coffee, and I have a cat, so I hang out with my cat for a little bit. I typically like will watch some videos that I have in my queue on YouTube or whatnot, and I'll usually kind of wake up to watching. Typically, I'll watch some music videos that I have, concerts, bands that I really love. I'll come across some of those, and I'll watch them a little bit in the morning. I'm a big fan of listening to interviews. Not necessarily podcasts, but I do love podcasts. But I generally like if there's a band I'm very interested in, I will find some good live footage of this band or that band. And but a lot of the times I'm kind of interested or fascinated by how they create their work, and so I'll seek out an interview, and so I'll like really dive into that aspect of it, and I'll listen to like interviews with like the artists and whatnot. And then the other thing that I end up doing a lot, like I've said too in a lot of these previous shows, there's a couple of guys on YouTube that I really love. Moods, who is he's probably my favorite YouTube guy, and he basically is a movie guy. And he does all kinds of films, but he basically his specialty is talking about all things horror, particularly horror exploitation movies and exploitation movies in general. And I got turned on to him, geez, not that long ago, probably like 6 months ago, maybe almost a year. And it was funny because, and he's Canadian. And it goes by the name of Moods, and it's you spell it Moodz. And it was actually during the lockdown when the pandemic first hit, and obviously there was no places to go, and you couldn't see people, and there was so everybody was stuck in their house. And I had randomly came across this guy Moods, who's based. I think he's based in Ontario, Canada, and I'd randomly came across his show, and he did a like a quick review. It was like a 20-minute, half hour review of his top 10 horror film list, or his top 10 favorite horror films. And I remember watching it, and I was like, wow, like a lot of the movies he talked about. Well, there was quite a few I had never heard of before, but some of them I remember seeing when I was a kid, and I was like, oh wow, I totally forgot about that. The one movie in particular that I remember he had talked a lot about was Bill Luswig's Maniac, which came out in 1980. Um, and I remember seeing that movie as a kid, and he was saying how this movie was like, one of his favorites. He thought it was like one of the, like the quintessential horror exploitation movie. And I remember I wrote a couple of notes, and I jotted some of the names down, some of the titles that he had talked about, and Maniac was one of them. And I was like, yeah, I remember that movie like from so long ago, and I remember it being just really brutal and just like an amazing slasher movie, really gritty and raw. So then about a couple of weeks later, I looked it up online and I tried to find it, and I saw it listed, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I totally remember this movie. And then about a few months after that, I ended up going to Bull Moose, like I talk about all the time, and they had it there, and I bought it, and it's actually no, I actually got it, I actually ordered it online, which I don't ever usually do, but I ordered it online, and it was great, and it's brought back a lot of memories. I hadn't seen it in, like I said, who knows how many years, and it's just such an amazing film. It's definitely one of my favorite slasher films. And probably 6 months, 7 months, or whatnot went by, and you know, I had kind of forgot about Moods. I kind of forgot about his show, and then for whatever reason, I was like, oh wait, I remember there was this guy from Canada who was this YouTuber, and he, was talking about all these really great kind of underground grindhouse horror exploitation movies, and a lot of them were kind of obscure. And he talked a lot about also about a lot of Dario Argento films. Who, if you don't know who Dario Argento, I mean, he's one of the greatest horror directors ever, Italian giallo filmmaker. And he Suspiria, he's probably most well known for that. And he talked about, I don't know, three or four movies of his that I had never seen, and I've seen quite a few of his movies over the years, but this little handful that he was like talking about I had never seen before. So I was like, this is awesome. So at the time, and then 6 months later, I was trying to think about, wait, what was this guy's name? I didn't save it. I didn't put it in my queue or anything. And so I did these searches, and I eventually found him, and I realized that that I, the first video of his that I came across and I watched where he talked about Maniac was actually close to 8 years old. Like I didn't realize how old this video was. So I remember watching the video again, and then I went and I was like, oh, he's got a channel. So I went and checked out the channel, and he literally had like hundreds upon hundreds of videos of all of this stuff. And he was still around, and he was like even more active now. He was just constantly putting up all these great posts of all of these great movies, and I just was like, it just opened up this whole world of a lot of things I had seen, like again when I was a kid. And movies like, say, Maniac is a perfect example, but it also like opened up, if you liked those kinds of movies. He did a few things on Herschel Gordon Lewis, who did Blood Feast and 1,000 Maniacs. And if you like, so he talked about, those directors and those kinds of films that were pretty obscure and, super underground. And I was like, I, very, very much like these films, but it was a thing of like, well, if you like these films or movies in this style, then there's all these other movies that you should check out. And that's where I was like, wow, I haven't seen most of these movies. So at that point I started making lists, and it was pretty phenomenal. So I literally started making these lists with a notebook and a piece of paper and a pen, and I literally made these like giant lists of all of these films. And that started me really getting back into, I mean, I've always bought movies and I've always like sought things out, quite a bit, but I started getting more meticulous, and I started concentrating more on these kind of obscure weird films. and I started, seeking those out and finding areas where they were sold. Case in point, the Bull Moose in Waterville. I came across and I started going there, and I realized this store in particular had hundreds of these titles. So that became a thing for me whenever I would go there. So I started buying all those kinds of films there. And now, like I was saying, and usually in the morning I'll talk about, like I was talking about things that I do. But so I usually check out some concerts and of some bands I really like, and then I'll seek out some interviews, and and a lot of the stuff is movie centric. So I'll check out. There's like two or three guys that I really like that uh, you know do these really great. You have these great YouTube channels and talk about, and it's all centered on movie reviews and those kinds of things. But usually it's Moods. He's my number one man. He's really great. I actually had a little bit of an interaction with him online, and he was very cool. He got right back to me, but he's great. I mean, he's one of the biggest guys. He's got like probably 80, 90,000 people who watch his site, and he's a hardcore director, hardcore collector of films. But he sees everything, like everything that he has in his collection. He has seen like numerous times, and he's like an encyclopedia of film. Chris Stuckman's another guy I really like. He does more. He does a lot of films that are more like, I don't know if you say highbrow, but more commercial films. But he does a lot of reviews of. Well, he does reviews of all kinds of things, but it's mostly centered on a lot of horror films. And he's great. I really like him. He's I guess for what it's worth, he's like the number one YouTube guy on online, and he's also now moving into becoming a filmmaker, and he has his first film coming out pretty soon, so that should be interesting. But I check out his stuff as far as like films that are more commercial based horror films, and he's usually spot on. I find that when a lot of movies that I've gone to the last year or so, I've gone more into the theater. I've gone back to the theater quite a bit, and I've gone to a lot of movies that I didn't necessarily know all that much about, but based on his his kind of recommendation on his channel, I find like 99% of the time he's like spot on, and I totally agree with him, and he's really great. The last movie I saw uh, was X, Ty West movie X that came out this year, which is a fantastic horror movie, very much in the vein of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I had seen a review of that film, and I had not. That was the first time I'd heard about it, and that was through Chris Stuckman's YouTube page. So it's very good. It's a great resource. Another movie that I remember being really fantastic that I saw actually a couple of years ago now was the remake of The Invisible Man, which is just an awesome movie. One of the best remakes, and I just think one of the better horror suspense films that's come out in a few years. And I'll eventually do a show on that movie because I really love that movie. So it's a great resource. And then there's another guy that I haven't watched in a while, but I do really like a lot. This guy, his name is Adam Caesar, and he does similar to what Moods does. Is he does a lot of horror exploitation movies, and but one of the things that he does that's kind of interesting and different. He's also Adam Caesar's also an author, and he's got numerous books out, and he's a pretty popular podcaster or YouTube guy, and he's got a bunch of books out. So what he'll do is he'll split the show up between you know a list of different films he's talking about, but then he'll pair it with like other books that he feels would be, if you're, watching, say, something like, you know, um, some slasher film or a film that say is like a ghost story or like based on some kind of like a haunted house. He'll talk about the film, but then he'll pair it with a book that's similar in style or genre. So he's really great. So yeah, it's a great resource. So typically that's what I do in the morning is I do that kind of stuff and slowly wake up, and then I a lot of the times also as I do a lot of booking. I do a lot of booking. I don't really book for other groups or other projects, but typically what I do is for my band Quantum is I do all the booking for that. So that's, and if people don't know what that is, what that entails, basically, you find a club or a venue or an event or maybe a festival or something that you hear about through word of mouth or something you see online. A lot of the times, if there's a certain, like where we live here in Mid Coast, Maine, there, it's a really small, kind of town, or like atmosphere. It's a very, down home kind of vibe, and there's, you know, but the thing is that's so cool. Obviously it's not a major city, or even like for us, Portland is like the biggest city in Maine, and I don't really even consider that a city necessarily. I consider it more of a big town, but that's like a couple hours away from me, and that's like where there's obviously a real dense population. But where we live here in Northport, where I'm close to Rockland, Maine, I'm close to Belfast. It's a pretty rural place for the most part. We have all the tourists that come here, and there's like a lot of people that come through during the summer, and there's still quite a few people here now, and it is September. There's still quite a few people here, but compared to most urban areas, it's very much like a country town. But that being said, there's so much talent I feel musically in this area in Mid Coast. There's like so many great bands. There's so many great musicians here, and it's really rich with just a wealth of music. And there's luckily and fortunately there's for what it is and the geographics around it. There's a lot of venues. There's a lot of places that have music, and so it's very surprising. It's always there's so much activity going on in a small area like this. So, and there's on any given night there's some music to see virtually wherever you are. For instance, like there's a really great place here in Belfast, the Marshall Wharf, Through Tides. Just an amazing place. It's a brew pub, but it's right on the water. Like this week alone, for instance, they have music at least three times during the week. Like they had a band play Tuesday, they have music tonight and tomorrow night, and I think Saturday. And that's 6 or 7 minutes away from my house, and it's all different bands, and it's pretty amazing. Like you can, so if you wanted to go see some music, and most of the bands I have not heard of, it's that's just one example. And so typically, like when I was talking about booking and what that entails, it's basically I'll come across certain places, or hear about certain venues, and then I'll seek them out, and I'll typically find the contact for whoever does the booking, and I'll like whether it's through Gmail or Yahoo or through Facebook. A lot of times it's Facebook and emailing. And so you track down the person who does the booking, and that usually takes a little bit of time, and you find that contact, and then you send them out. You send out a message saying kind of what you're looking for. You give like generally a brief description of what the band is, and I play in different projects, but each band kind of has their own contact person or their point guy or girl who kind of does the same kind of work. And for Quantum, I do all of that work. I do all of the booking for any gigs that we have. I do all of the coordination, and it's pretty easy as far as that goes because it's just me and my friend Mike Whitehead, we don't really. So it's just two personalities to to deal with, and schedule wise, it's very easy because it's just two people. So, and then when we have shows booked, I do all the promotion stuff for that too, and it's a lot of work. At times, it can be pretty intense, but I love it and it's super fun. And I learn a lot about the whole process more and more each year and each time I do it. Um, and basically, you send out an email, reach out, saying, giving a general synopsis of the band. You might send like some clips of the band, maybe some photos, kind of what you're about, how big the band is, and then you send out. And typically what I will do when more so in the middle or in the beginning of the season or like leading up to the summer season, I'll try to get usually a jump on that kind of thing earlier, like in maybe even the winter time. I'll make like a list of different places that I'm reaching out to, and I'll send out, in the morning, I'll send out a whole bunch of emails or messages. And then some places get back to you right away. A lot of places don't. A lot of the times it's like you kind of got to wait. You got to wait and wait a little bit. Sometimes it's a week or two. A lot of times places just don't get back to you. And so you kind of have to have a little bit of to a degree, like thick skin. You can't really look at it as like a rejection, like an emotional rejection, because then you get all worked up about it. Try to just put on that professional hat and just look at that aspect as just the business, and don't get emotional about it. So typically, like if I send out a thing to a club or venue, I'll like when it's going pretty good, I'll like hear back relatively quick from that group, like sometimes the same day or maybe a couple hours or the next day. And if I find that they're interested, they'll typically ask, "Well, okay, do you have some dates and or can you send us some clips, audio clips?" For us, it's been a little bit more helpful because we had just we just came out with a new album this year, so it was like a little bit of an extra thing to try to promote and to use to try to get some shows. And we have a lot of albums out, so that's at least for us as a bonus, is that we can like use that as a little bit of a calling card. So typically, if they get back to you soon, they'll ask for that kind of information, and then they'll ask, "Oh, well, do you have any dates in mind?" or blah blah blah. Send that stuff out, and then you go back and forth. And typically, if that person or that party is interested in what you're doing with Quantum or whatnot, so they'll like you'll like nail a date down and a time, and then you work out the pay about what you're asking for financially. So that's typically what happens. And then you have your other clubs and other places where they don't really get back to you. So then you kind of go through the cycle of where you'll give it a week or give it like 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll like send a follow up email. And then there's some places that just don't get back to you. So then you'll like put it on the back burner for a while, and then maybe the following 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe even a month, you'll get back. And sometimes they actually get back to you, and you can kind of you kind of have to have these little um, things on the back burner a lot, and you got to kind of follow up on them. And it's just that process of doing that, and it takes a lot of time. It's you have to have a lot of patience. Back when I like a band I was talking about yesterday in my other show, Film Fanatic show, the band I used to play, one of the bands I used to play in, Full Contact Kitty, we I did a lot of, or I attempted to do a lot of the booking when we were, first out of the gate then. And I was really, green, very inexperienced as far as how to do that. And I was not very good at it, and I didn't have any patience, and I get like, I take it personally. So I ended up not doing it. I kind of stopped doing it, and I just didn't really enjoy it. It was, it was just hard, and then so when I started Quantum, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, I I was like, well, I'm kind of doing this my own little thing, and I don't really, not that I know what I'm doing now, but this was like really even more uncharted territory, and I was doing things even more by myself. I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to try to make this thing kind of happen. I think there's something here. I got some encouragement from some friends and people around the band that you got something here, so you should try to like make it into like an actual band, as opposed to like a one-off project. So that's when I started to get back into like trying to book things, and over the years since I've been doing it, I've learned a lot, and I'm kind of at a point now where I actually enjoy that process of it. And it's a lot of, there's and it comes and goes in waves. Like sometimes there's days or weeks where I'm doing it really hardcore, and I'm like few hours in the morning or 3 or 4 hours or throughout the day, and it's a lot of work, and I make these lists and I'm like hitting it pretty hard, and then I gotta like check my email a lot of the times, and check my messages, and do these follow-ups and coordinate and that stuff, and it's a lot of work, but I enjoy it, and I learned a lot. I keep learning a lot about the process. And then while I'm doing that kind of thing, typically what I'll do is, when I have gigs booked, then I'll do promotion. Basically I'll set up event pages for various gigs through Facebook or other ways, and I'll do I'll try to find some photos of the band. I'll try to like get a good masking for the event page, and I'll try to set up a thing with links, and then I'll spend a lot of time putting that stuff together, and then the subsequent weeks leading up to the show, I'll like promote it as much as I can through various avenues on social media or whatnot. And that can be a lot of work too, because you're trying to put yourself out there. You're trying to get people at least aware of what's going on. So that's a big push too. So both of those things I typically spend a lot of time on, more so in like the beginning of the season, and in the middle of the season. Right now it's like things are kind of like starting to slow down a little bit. It's still relatively busy, but it's kind of unfortunately kind of comes down a lot as far as the seasonal aspect of it. But typically those kinds of things happen a lot during you know before the summer, or like in the height of the summer, where there's a lot of work around that stuff. And then aside from that, I like to write music a lot, and I'm a big fan of practicing music. So the other thing that I try to do is I try to spend a lot of time working on quantum stuff, like rehearsing a lot of the music that we have, and then also writing a lot of the music. Or if I have new ideas, I'll spend a lot of time working on that stuff, trying to put that stuff together. And then also I'll spend a lot of time trying to practice drum set and various things that that I have that I'm constantly trying to work on. So I usually that's like a typical day for me. And then I'll usually do other things that I do is I've been doing more videos. And in the past I was doing Film Fanatic videos, but it was like a couple times a month, or pretty sporadic. Now I'm doing them more as I'm trying to like beef up this channel. So that's like a typical day, or in a good day for me, that's like what I'll be doing. Aside from if I have stuff going on, later on in the day or at night, but that's a typical day for me, or what I try to do every day. So yeah, and what I mentioned too is 2 videos back I wanted to do this whole show and a series on the Friday the 13th movies. And again, the reason was it was just recently announced that there's going to be some newer Friday the 13th movies coming our way in the next couple of years, or this year, because the big lawsuit that Friday the 13th and Sean Cunningham, Victor Lewis, the creators, they were in the middle of this whole like crazy lawsuit, and it just recently got the court case came to a conclusion, and I believe there was a settlement. So it was announced that now the franchise is going to be moving forward supposedly. So I thought that was cool and interesting, and so it kind of I don't know just it sparked my interest when I heard that there's going to be new movies. But then it also was like, oh, I have all the movies, so I'm going to start watching them again. And I have the entire collection of all of the Friday 13th movies on Blu-ray and one or two on DVD, a couple on DVD, but I have all of them on Blu-ray now. And so I thought, well, okay, this just like renewed my interest a little bit. I've seen these movies a bazillion times, and I've also, these movies are always a part of my, these movies are a part of my DNA. So I thought it would be cool. Like, why don't I just do, I don't usually do too many shows of where I'll concentrate on like a franchise per se. So I figured, why not? What the heck? I'll do a series on Film Fanatic where I'll review and talk about all the films. So, yeah, so this one today is going to be on Friday 13th, Part 2. And initially, when Sean Cunningham and Victor Lewis, when they created the Friday 13th movie, the first one, they had no intention of it, becoming a franchise. And of course, like I've said in previous videos, it became a phenomenon, and the film was distributed through Paramount Pictures, which is a major studio. So they were approached because of the success of the film about making more, and basically they felt this was going to be a serious franchise. So then that's what they did. And this was the sequel. It came out literally like a year later, Friday 13th Part 2. And Sean Cunningham basically, signed over the rights basically to he created the franchise, and Victor Lewis. So they basically had creative control. They were getting the credit, but they were also like getting the checks. And this movie was Friday 13th Part 2 was directed by Steve Miner, and it was again distributed by Paramount Pictures. It starred Amy Steele, Adrian Kin, Kristen Baker, John Furry, Marta Carey, and Betsy Palmer, who was Jason Voorhees' mother. She was in it briefly also. And this film was, it's interesting too because I I liked this film a lot when I was a kid. I remember because this movie is more centered on now the second film kind of moves into the thing of where it's the first film where it's focused on Jason Voorhees. The first one was mostly centered on the mother of Jason Voorhees, and this one is the first one that is centered on him. And this is before he has the iconic hockey mask, and he's wearing like a white hood, and and I remember liking this one as a kid. But as I got older, and I remember I bought the box set, the full Blu-ray box set, and I've watched it quite a few times since I bought it, and I'd seen it a zillion times, like I said, and I always thought this one's good, but I just felt like I don't know, it just felt like it lacked a lot of the suspense of the first one, because what I've always said to other people, but also in the last two videos, my favorite out of all of the I love all the films. I have a place in my heart for all of them. I especially really like the one that came out about 10 years ago, which I'll eventually do a show on at the conclusion of this whole thing. And it was meant to be kind of a reboot, but I actually really like the newer one because it reminds me in a lot of ways of Part 4, uh, the final chapter, which is my favorite film of the series. Who which stars Ted White as Jason Voorhees. It kind of reminds me a lot of that as far as the intensity of Jason's character and the brutality of the kills. Uh, but I always thought that part two was okay. I always thought it was good. I always loved the image of Jason Voorhees with the white hood. It was always pretty scary and terrifying, and I thought it was pretty good. But I thought it was, I don't know. Initially, I kind of thought, I've seen it so many times, but I always kind of thought it was too much of a thing of where they tried to make it so much like the first one because it literally fit the same exact formula. And I get that it's a franchise, and what they're doing is a formula to it. It's a slasher exploitation movie really, and I get that there's a formula, but I just felt like it was trying to be so much, trying to capture the magic of the first one to a T, but it just wasn't as good, that kind of thing. Because my two favorite films is the first one, the very first Friday 13th, and chapter 4, the final chapter. Those are my two favorite in the entire series. My favorite film in the series is chapter 4. I just love it. But those two movies, I love them. And it was funny because while I was doing these videos, when I got the idea to do these videos, I started watching all the movies again. And I just finished chapter 4 last night, and I'll eventually be doing a video on that. But I also watched chapter 2 yesterday, and I found myself really enjoying it. I enjoyed it more than I remembered, even though I've seen it so many times, and it kind of grew on me. I forgot for some reason the impact of the kills in the movie. I thought it was pretty impressive. I thought there was a cool level of suspense, or a better level of suspense to it than I had um, thought thought about in the past. And I found myself getting more lost in it. I found it was even more entertaining than I remember it being in the past, and I think overall it stands up. I think it's a cool step in the franchise in the direction of, like, now Jason Voorhees, not Michael Myers. Jason Voorhees is now the centerpiece of the story, and it's kind of more taken on the sense of even more of a revenge tale. And the Blu-ray is great. The transfer is wonderful. It's got all the great Friday 13 tropes in it so far, and yeah. But I remember it being better watching it last night. It grew on me even more, which is funny because I've seen it I don't know how many times, but I remember enjoying the experience even more. And it was very cool, very enjoyable, and so yeah. So I'm looking forward to the next show. I'll be doing the next show very soon, part 3, Friday 13th. And the interesting thing and very different thing about this movie coming up will be, it's going to be centered on, this movie's especially even centered on Jason Voorhees, but he acquires the iconic hockey mask. And also this movie was shot in 3D, which was another thing that was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. So that will be the next show. So this is Jason Dean, Film Fanatic, YouTube. Thanks again for the support. If you get a chance, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jason Dean. And we will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.